Ancient Celtic mythology holds a god of immense contradictions. The Dagda stands among its most compelling figures, a deity called the good god, not for moral perfection, but for his mastery over every vital domain. By the end of this exploration, you will understand the surprising depth behind that simple title and the true nature of his vast power. We will uncover why a club that could kill and resurrect was just the start, and how a single magical cauldron could feed an entire race of gods. What kind of character do you associate with a truly good god? His very name, the Dagda, means the good god, but this goodness is not what you might first assume. In the old Irish tongue, the word good carried a far heavier weight. It meant more than just moral virtue. It signified a profound and complete capability, an excellence in all things. He was good because he was skilled, powerful, and effective in every domain that mattered to the Celtic world. This was a god of total competence. Alongside this primary title, he bore other names that painted a fuller portrait. He was Eochaid Ollathair, the All-Father, a name declaring him as the literal father of the gods and the patriarch of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the tribe of the goddess Danu. This was not a distant, aloof fatherhood, but a direct, generative one, the source from which many other powerful deities sprang. And then there was Ruad Rofhessa, the Lord of Great Knowledge. This title reveals his mastery over the druidic arts, the deep magic of the land. He was a seer, a poet, and a sorcerer whose wisdom guided his people. These three names together, the good God, the All-Father, and the Lord of Great Knowledge, create a stunningly complete image. He was the ultimate provider, the fierce protector, and the wise counselor all in one. Think of the most capable person you know, the one who can fix anything, solve any problem, and offer sound advice. The Dagda was that figure, but on a divine, cosmic scale. His goodness was his boundless, reliable utility to his people, a deity you could count on for a full belly, a defended home, and a wise word in a time of crisis. This profound capability, this mastery over life itself, was a legacy he passed on. The Dagda's own lineage was as vast and powerful as his responsibilities, rooted in figures of immense power. His father was Ollathair, a king of the Fomorians, a race often depicted as monstrous oppressors. Yet Ollathair was described as strikingly beautiful, a noble and fair prince who arrived from across the sea. This connection reveals a deep truth about Celtic mythology, where alliances and bloodlines blur the lines between supposed enemies. From his mother, the goddess Danu herself, he inherited his place as a founding pillar of the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. As the All-Father, his own children formed the very heart of this divine tribe. His daughter was the revered Brigid, a goddess of fire, the hearth, poetry, and healing, whose influence was so profound she was later adopted into Christian sainthood. His sons were equally legendary. Aengus Óg, the god of youth and love, used his clever wit to win the love of his life and secure a palace that existed in a single day. There was Midir, a proud and powerful king of the otherworld, whose story of lost love and a magical swan is one of the most haunting tales in the cycle. And Bóinne, who would become a king of the Tuatha Dé Danann after their retreat into the fairy mounds, guiding his people in their new, hidden existence. The Dagda's family was not just a list of names, it was the active, beating heart of the mythological world. Each child carried a fragment of his vast domain, spreading his influence over poetry, love, kingship, and magic. Through them, the goodness of the All-Father rippled outward, shaping every corner of the Celtic cosmos. This image of a generous father and wise lord might clash with how the Dagda was often depicted in the old tales. He is portrayed not as a slender, ethereal being, but as a figure of immense, earthy substance. The Dagda was a large, robust man, a giant of a god whose very physique spoke of his functions. He possessed a mighty, almost boundless appetite, a direct reflection of his role as a god of abundance and the earth's fertility. you would often find him dressed in a simple, rustic tunic that barely reached his knees, a practical garment for a hands-on deity. This was not a god concerned with royal finery, but one who was deeply connected to the land and its people. His grand size and his hunger were not flaws or comedic traits, they were powerful symbols. They represented the insatiable need of the land to be fruitful and the overflowing bounty it could provide in return. His strength was the raw, untamed power of a storm or a mighty oak tree, a force that could both create and protect. This earthy appearance grounded him in the reality of Celtic life, where a good harvest and physical strength were the foundations of survival. He embodied the practical side of divinity, a god you could envision sharing a meal with, a protector whose strength was as tangible as the soil underfoot. His entire being was a testament to the idea that true power is not always delicate or refined, but can be as solid and dependable as the earth itself. His immense physical power was matched only by the legendary tools he carried, and none was more iconic than his club. This was no ordinary weapon. It was an artifact of such staggering size and weight that the Dagda could not simply carry it on his shoulder. Instead, it had to be hauled behind him on a massive wheeled cart, the deep ruts it left in the earth a testament to its impossible burden. The sheer scale of this club immediately communicates that we are dealing with a force of nature, a being whose strength defies mortal limits. But its true magic lay not in its weight, but in its profound duality. One end of this colossal club possessed the power to kill. A single swing could strike down 9 men in an instant, obliterating any who stood against him. Yet the other end held the exact opposite power, the miraculous ability to restore life. With a touch from this life-giving side, those same 9 men would be brought back from the brink, their wounds healed and their vitality returned. This was not merely a weapon of war, it was a perfect symbol of the Dagda's ultimate authority. He was not just a god of death or a god of life, he was the master of both cycles. His power ensured the necessary end of things, clearing the way for new beginnings, and his mercy could grant a second chance, a return to the world. This club represented the 2 fundamental forces of existence held in a single, balanced whole by the good God. It was the tool of a true All-Father, one who held the power to both protect his children from their enemies and to restore them should they fall. Yet this mighty club was only one part of his divine toolkit. The Dagda also possessed a cauldron of such profound magic that it defined his very essence as a provider. This was the Qua Ansik, the undry cauldron, a vessel from which no one was ever turned away hungry. Its magic was beautifully simple and endlessly vital. No matter how many mouths needed feeding, the cauldron would never run empty. It could provide a feast for an army or a simple meal for a lone traveler, always offering exactly what was needed to bring satisfaction. This was not merely a magical artifact, it was a direct expression of the Dagda's role as the All-Father. His duty was to ensure the prosperity and well-being of his people, the Tuatha Dé Danann, and this cauldron was the ultimate guarantee of that security. In a world where scarcity was a constant threat, the Qua Ansik represented a perfect, unshakable abundance. Think of the deepest sense of security you can feel, the knowledge that you will always have a place at the table and food to nourish you. The Dagda, through this cauldron, offered that certainty to an entire race of gods. Its power went beyond simple sustenance. In the Celtic world, the act of sharing food was a sacred bond, a core principle of kingship and hospitality. A true king was judged by his ability to provide for his people, to keep their bellies full and their spirits high. By owning this cauldron, the Dagda embodied the ideal of the generous sovereign. He was the ultimate host whose hospitality could never be exhausted. This magical vessel cemented his identity not just as a powerful fighter, but as the foundational provider, the one who ensured that the community would not just survive but thrive. But the provider's cauldron and the warrior's club were not the only symbols of his authority. the Dagda commanded a third treasure, one that governed the very emotions of the world. This was his harp, a living instrument named Uaithne. It was no mere collection of wood and string. It possessed a soul and a will, responding only to its master's call. This harp held the power to play 3 sacred strains of music, each with its own profound effect. The first was the Goldtrage, the weeping strain, a melody of such profound sorrow it could make an entire army weep in grief. The second was the Geintrage, the laughing strain, a joyous tune that would lift every heart and fill a hall with irrepressible mirth. And the third was the Suantrage, the sleeping strain, a gentle, soothing air that could calm the most troubled spirit and lull all who heard it into a deep, peaceful slumber. With this harp, the Dagda did not just rule the land and its bounty, he conducted the very feelings of his people. After the Tuatha Dé Danann suffered a terrible defeat, the Fomorians, their enemies, raided their camp and stole this precious harp, seeing it as a prize that would crush the spirit of their foes. They took it to their own feasting hall, a place of grim celebration, and hung it on the wall as a trophy. But they could not make it sing, for it would not answer to any hand but the Dagda's. When the All-Father discovered the theft, he did not march in with his club. Instead, he walked alone to the heart of the Fomorian fortress. He entered their great hall, where the warriors fell silent at his imposing presence. And there, on the wall, hung Uaithne. He stretched out his hand and called to it. The harp leaped from its peg, flying through the air into his waiting grasp. Then, with a single, resonant chord, it unleashed its magic. First, it played the weeping strain, and every Fomorian in the hall broke down in uncontrollable tears, their strength dissolving into sorrow. Then it shifted to the laughing strain, and they were seized by fits of hysterical laughter, rolling on the floor, utterly helpless. Finally, as the Dagda turned to leave, it played the sleeping strain, and every last one of them collapsed into a deep, enchanted slumber. He walked out unchallenged, having reclaimed not just an instrument, but the soul of his people's joy and resilience. The All-Father was far more than a title, it was the very core of his being. This paternal authority extended far beyond simple fatherhood, shaping the destiny of the entire Tuatha Dé Danann and offering a divine model for human kings and chieftains. His protection was not a distant promise, but an active, fierce force. When his people were threatened, he was the first to stand as their bulwark, his legendary club and cauldron serving as symbols of his unwavering commitment to their safety and sustenance. He was the protector who would not let his children go hungry, nor let their enemies go unpunished, yet his guidance went deeper than physical might. As the Lord of great knowledge, he was the source of druidic wisdom, the one his children turned to for counsel in times of uncertainty. He provided the strategic insight that won wars and the poetic inspiration that fostered their culture. Think of the ideal father, the one who not only puts food on the table, but also offers the wise words that help you navigate life's greatest challenges. The Dagda embodied this dual role on a cosmic scale. His relationship with his own divine children perfectly illustrates this. He did not rule them with an iron fist, but with a supportive hand, allowing them to forge their own paths while always being their ultimate safeguard. His son Aengus, the god of love, famously tricked his father out of his own home, the magnificent Bóinne. Instead of anger, the Dagda responded with a kind of bemused pride, acknowledging his son's cleverness. This was a father who valued wit and resourcefulness, who understood that his children's triumphs were his own. His deep bond with his daughter Brigid, a goddess of equal power and reverence, shows a respect that transcended simple patriarchy. He was the root from which these incredible, diverse powers grew, and his greatest strength was nurturing that growth. For the ancient Celts, this made him a god they could relate to directly. He modeled the virtues of a good chieftain, a good leader, and a good father, all intertwined into one powerful, dependable figure. His goodness was ultimately this profound relational care, a divine assurance that someone was always watching over the world. This profound connection to the land was the very bedrock of the Dagda's power. His immense appetite and robust form were not just personal traits but reflections of his sacred role as a god of the earth and agriculture. For the Celtic people, whose survival was woven into the cycles of the soil, the Dagda was the divine force who ensured the fields grew green and the harvests were plentiful. His strength was the strength of a fertile field, his abundance the promise of a full storehouse. He did not rule from a distant sky but was present in the very dirt under their fingernails, in the sprouting grain, and in the fattening of the livestock. This was a god who understood that true prosperity began with the earth's generosity. His great club, which could both destroy and restore life, mirrors the agricultural cycle itself. The land must sometimes lie fallow, old growth must be cleared away for new life to burst forth with even greater vigor. The Dagda held authority over this entire, necessary process of death and rebirth. His power was not a gentle, abstract blessing. It was the raw, generative force that turned the seasons and filled the tribe's bellies. Can you envision the absolute reliance an ancient farmer would have on such a deity? A bad harvest meant starvation, a weak herd meant poverty. The Dagda, in his earthy, tangible might, was their divine insurance against such disasters. His cauldron, the Qua Ansik, was the ultimate symbol of this agricultural security. Its endless supply of food was a magical extension of the ideal harvest, a season of such incredible bounty that it could never be exhausted. He guaranteed that the land would not just provide, but provide abundantly, transforming the anxiety of subsistence into the comfort of surety. This made him not just a powerful figure in their myths, but a central pillar in their daily lives and the ultimate source of their tribe's prosperity. His mastery over the land and its rhythms was rooted in a deeper, more esoteric power. The title Ruad Rofhessa, the Lord of Great Knowledge, was not an empty honorific but a direct statement of his command over the druidic arts. This was not the simple magic of fantasy, but a profound understanding of the world's hidden currents, the ability to read the future in the patterns of nature and to shape reality with spoken words. The Dagda was the ultimate druid, a seer whose wisdom guided the very fate of the Tuatha Dé Danann. In times of crisis, the other gods did not just ask for his strength, they sought his foresight. Before great battles, he would cast spells of protection over the warriors, charms that could turn a spear or harden a shield. He could utter a prophecy by observing the flight of a bird or the shift in the wind, offering his people a glimpse of what was to come. This supernatural knowledge made him the strategic heart of his tribe. Can you conceive of the confidence it would inspire, knowing your leader could not only crush your enemies with a club, but also outthink them with an intellect that pierced the veil of time itself? His magic was a practical, essential tool for survival and victory. It was said he could recite poetry that would bind a man with Jisa, a sacred oath or taboo that, if broken, would lead to certain doom. With a carefully spoken verse, he could compel an enemy into a fatal mistake or secure a promise that would shape the destiny of a kingdom. This was the true meaning of his goodness, his complete capability. He was the All-Father who provided food, the warrior who offered protection, and the sage who delivered the wisdom to navigate an unpredictable world. His power was a perfect triad, as balanced and fundamental as the three sacred strains of his harp. This vast power found its ultimate test in the great mythological wars. The Dagda's story is not one of isolated feats, but is woven into the very fabric of the mythological cycle, the collection of tales that chronicle the arrival and struggles of the Tuatha Dé Danann in Ireland. His prominence among this divine tribe was not merely a matter of seniority, but of active, indispensable leadership, especially during their most desperate conflict, the epic struggle against their nemesis, the Fomorians. These were not simple battles of good versus evil, but complex wars of sovereignty, survival, and cosmic balance. The Fomorians represented the chaotic, untamed forces of nature, a grim counterpoint to the Tuatha Dé Danann's desire for ordered rule. And when this conflict reached its peak, it was the Dagda who stood as the chief champion and strategist for his people. His role was cemented in the lead up to the Second Battle of Mag Tuired, the climactic confrontation that would decide the fate of Ireland. The other gods did not just follow him, they relied on his every action. In a pivotal moment before the fighting began, he was sent on a crucial mission directly into the Fomorian camp. His task was twofold: to secure a temporary truce and, more importantly, to act as a spy, assessing the enemy's strength and their intentions. The Dagda, in his seemingly simple guise, approached their fortress and was met not with spears, but with a challenge meant to humiliate him. The Fomorians, knowing his legendary appetite, prepared a monumental porridge as a test. They filled a colossal cauldron with 80 measures of milk, grain, and fat, along with whole goats, sheep, and swine, boiling it all into a gargantuan stew. They then demanded he eat it all or be killed for his insolence. The Dagda took his great ladle, so large a man and woman could lie in it, and consumed the entire feast, even scraping the bottom and sides of the cauldron clean. He then waddled away, his body so distended that the Fomorians laughed at his apparent discomfort, completely underestimating the mind that operated behind that vast hunger. They saw a glutton, but he was a master of intelligence, having learned everything he needed while satisfying their crude test. This act was more than a bizarre tale, it was a display of his essential nature. He consumed the insult they offered and transformed it into a strategic victory, proving that his capacity, his goodness, could digest even the poison of his enemies and turn it to his people's advantage. His involvement was the key that unlocked their path to victory, setting the stage for the final, earth-shattering battle where his club, his harp, and his wisdom would all be called upon to secure a future for the Tuatha Dé Danann. His mission of gluttonous espionage complete, the Dagda returned to the Tuatha Dé Danann, and not just with intelligence but with a stomach still full of the Fomorian feast. On the eve of the battle, he encountered the Morrigan, the terrifying goddess of war and fate, bathing in a river. Their union was not one of romance, but of sheer, potent magic, a ritual to seal the sovereignty of Ireland and ensure victory. As they came together, she promised to use her own formidable power to unravel the very hearts of the Fomorian king, in debt, draining his strength and his will to fight. This sacred, fearsome act with the Morrigan was as crucial as any physical blow, a weaving of fate itself before the first spear was ever thrown. When the dawn broke and the armies clashed on the plain of Mag Tuired, the Dagda was everywhere at once. He was not a general shouting orders from the rear, but a colossal force wading directly into the fray. His great club, dragged behind him on its cart, became a whirlwind of destruction and salvation. With one end, he smashed through the Fomorian lines, felling warriors by the score, and with the other, he would reach down and touch his own fallen champions, restoring them to life so they could rejoin the fight. This relentless cycle of death and rebirth must have been a terrifying sight, a demoralizing tide that the enemy could not possibly stem. But his greatest strategic act was yet to come. As the battle raged, he saw a critical weakness in the Fomorian advance. Using his druidic knowledge, he recited a powerful incantation, a spell that called upon the very land of Ireland to rebel against the invaders. At his command, the hills and valleys themselves seemed to shift, the ground swallowing Fomorian warriors or opening into pits that broke their formations. He turned the geography of the battlefield into his personal weapon, proving that the Lord of great knowledge could command the earth as easily as he swung his club. The Fomorian champion, a mighty warrior named Sethlin, saw the chaos the Dagda was unleashing and charged directly at him. Their duel was not a long, elegant exchange of blows, but a brutal, decisive confrontation. Sethlin, known for her own venomous power, struck at the Dagda with a poisoned spear. The Dagda, with a speed that belied his massive frame, met her charge head-on. His club came around in a devastating arc, the killing end connecting with a force that echoed across the plain. It was not merely a physical strike, but a blow imbued with all the authority of the All-Father. Sethlin fell, and with her, the final coordinated resistance of the Fomorians crumbled. The Dagda's combined roles as strategist, druid, and unstoppable warrior had secured the future for his people, a victory forged as much by wisdom and magic as by sheer strength. That victory, however, was not secured by the club alone. On the eve of that fateful battle, as the tension hung thick in the air, the Dagda was sent on one last crucial errand. He was to secure a truce with the Fomorians, a temporary pause in hostilities to allow for final preparations. But this was a mission layered with deception, for his true purpose was to act as a spy, to walk directly into the lion's den and assess the enemy's strength. To accomplish this, he adopted a guise of simple-minded gluttony, playing perfectly into the Fomorians' perception of him as a brute. They saw him coming and decided to mock the great god by testing his legendary appetite. They prepared a grotesque feast, a cauldron filled with 80 measures of milk, 80 measures of meal, and whole goats, sheep, and swine, all boiled together into a monstrous porridge. They poured this into a hole in the ground and commanded him to eat it all, threatening him with death if he left a single drop. The Dagda took his enormous ladle, so vast a man and woman could lie together within it, and he consumed every last bit of the gruel, even scraping the sides and bottom of the pit clean. His stomach swelled to a massive, distended mound, and he waddled away, a comical and pitiable sight in the eyes of his enemies. They laughed, believing they had humiliated the All-Father. But they had failed to see the cunning mind behind the performance. He had not only satisfied their crude test, he had digested their arrogance and learned everything he needed about their camp, their numbers, and their overconfidence. This act of strategic gluttony was a masterpiece of deception, proving that his goodness, his complete capability, included a brilliant and subtle intellect. Full and burdened, he began his journey back to his people, but his night was far from over. His path led him to a river ford, a liminal space between two worlds, where he encountered a figure who would define the coming dawn. There, washing herself in the waters, was the Morrigan, the Phantom Queen. She was the embodiment of war and fate, a goddess of terrifying power who could sway the outcome of any battle with a prophecy. Their meeting was not a chance event, but a sacred, preordained convergence. As the Dagda stood at the bank, the Morrigan revealed herself to him. They did not speak of love or affection, but of power and destiny. In a union as potent as any spell, they came together, a ritual coupling that magically secured the sovereignty of the land itself. In that moment, she made him a promise, a vow that sealed their alliance. She swore she would use her formidable abilities against the Fomorians, that she would descend upon their king, Indech, and drain the very strength from his body and the will from his heart. This was not a pledge of military aid, but a curse of supernatural proportions. With this vow, the Morrigan bound the fate of the Tuatha Dé Danann to her own, ensuring that when the sun rose, the very currents of destiny would flow in their favor. The Dagda, having consumed the enemy's insult and now united with the force of fate itself, returned to his people not just as a spy or a warrior, but as the living instrument of a victory that was already being woven into reality. The great Dagda's power was not confined to battlefields or feasting halls. It was anchored to a specific, tangible place in the Irish landscape, a home that still stands today. His dwelling was the magnificent Brú na Bóinne, the great Neolithic passage tomb we know as Newgrange. This was no ordinary home. It was a palace of the otherworld, a sacred mound that bridged the realms of the divine and the mortal. For the Dagda to claim such a place as his personal abode speaks volumes about his status. This was one of the most revered and ancient sites in all of Ireland, a structure older than the pyramids of Egypt, and it belonged to the good God. Imagine the statement this made to the people. Their All-Father lived within the very heart of the land's oldest and most potent magic. The Brú was more than a house, it was a cosmic engine. Its most famous feature is the roof box, a precise opening above the entrance that, for a few precious minutes at dawn on the winter solstice, allows a single shaft of sunlight to pierce the deep darkness of the inner chamber, illuminating the sacred stones within. This was not an accident of architecture, it was a deliberate, breathtaking feat of engineering and astronomy. The Dagda, as the god of the land's fertility and the turning of the seasons, was intrinsically linked to this solar event. The sun's rebirth at the year's darkest point mirrored his own power over cycles of death and rebirth, a promise that the barren winter would always give way to a fruitful spring. His residence there made him the guardian of this eternal promise, the divine force ensuring the sun would return and the land would live again. Can you feel the profound comfort that connection would have given an ancient farmer, watching the solstice light enter the god's home, knowing the All-Father was within, guaranteeing the cycle would continue? This was where his role as a provider became a physical, observable part of the world. Yet, like many of his possessions, the Dagda's ownership of this magnificent palace was not without its complications. In a famous and clever tale, his son, the love god Aengus Óg, managed to trick him out of it. Aengus asked his father if he could live in the brew for just one day and one night. The Dagda, perhaps amused by the seemingly simple request, agreed. But when the time was up and the Dagda asked for his home back, Aengus refused. He argued that since all of time is made of days and nights, his lease was in fact eternal. The Dagda, the lord of great knowledge, was outwitted by his own son's clever play on words. Instead of anger, the stories tell us he accepted this with a kind of proud resignation. This was not a loss, but a passing of the torch, a recognition that the next generation could wield wisdom in new and surprising ways. It shows a god secure enough in his power to be bested by his own child, a father who valued cunning and wit as much as raw strength. The Brú na Bóinne, therefore, stands not just as a monument to the Dagda's power, but as a symbol of his enduring legacy, a home that housed the wisdom of the father and the cleverness of the son, forever linking the All-Father to the very pulse of the land and the cycles of the sun. This legendary hunger of his was far more than a simple character trait. It was the source of some of mythology's most memorable and surprisingly humorous tales. The story of the Fomorian porridge was just one example of his stomach becoming a stage for both strategy and comedy. In another famous episode, the Dagda encountered a giant who guarded a fortress filled with endless bounty. The giant, confident in his own strength and the impossibility of the task, challenged the god to a contest of consumption. He promised the Dagda all the wealth within his walls if he could first finish a monumental meal. The giant produced a cauldron of stew so vast it could have fed a village for a week. The Dagda simply sat down and ate it, every last drop. Then, still unsatisfied, he turned to the giant and asked what was for dessert. The giant, defeated and astonished, had no choice but to surrender his treasures. These stories were not told to mock the Dagda, but to celebrate his boundless capacity. His appetite was a direct, almost comical, reflection of his divine function, the endless consumption required to fuel the abundance of the world itself. Can you think of a more relatable divine quality than an insatiable love for a good meal? This humor makes him feel less like a distant, untouchable deity and more like a beloved, larger-than-life ancestor. The Celts saw no contradiction between his immense power and his very human foibles. In fact, they were intertwined. His need to eat on a colossal scale was just the other side of the coin from his ability to provide for everyone. The same cauldron that never emptied for his people required a god who could consume a lake of porridge to fulfill a plan. These tales of gluttony are ultimately stories of balance, reminding us that even the mightiest powers are grounded in the simple, universal language of hunger and satisfaction. His deep bond with the land found a more personal expression in his relationship with the river goddess Bóinne. She was the wife of the stern Nechtan, a god who guarded a sacred well of immense knowledge, a source from which no one was permitted to drink. Yet the pull between the All-Father and the vibrant bone was undeniable, and their union was one of profound consequence, a secret that needed the sun itself to conspire in its keeping. To be with her without her husband's knowledge, the Dagda wielded his most subtle magic. He reached out and held the sun still in the sky for the length of 9 months. For Bóinne and the Dagda, their single day of passion stretched across the entire term of her pregnancy, a divine secret hidden in plain sight. In that single, magically extended day, their son was conceived, carried, and born. They named him Aengus Óg, the young son, and his arrival was as swift and clever as the circumstances of his birth. This manipulation of time was not just a magical feat, it was a necessary act of protection, ensuring the child of the All-Father would enter the world without the shadow of scandal or the immediate wrath of a jealous husband. It speaks to the Dagda's authority over the very fabric of reality, his power to bend the rules of nature itself for the sake of his child. Think of the immense focus required to halt the sun's journey, to command the cosmos to pause for a single, private moment that would define a legacy. This was not the power of a club or a cauldron, but the profound druidic mastery of the Lord of Great Knowledge, used not for war, but for love and the safeguarding of new life. The magic that stretched a single day into 9 months reveals a profound truth about the Dagda. He was not merely a god of the earth's substance, but a master of time itself, the divine force guiding the relentless turn of the seasons. The Celtic year was not a simple calendar but a sacred wheel, and the Dagda's actions were the very engine that kept it spinning. This authority over the cycles of nature was most visible during the great festivals that marked the year's pivotal transitions, none more critical than Samhain, the festival we now know as the precursor to Halloween. Samhain, celebrated on the 1st of November, was far more than a harvest's end. It was the Celtic New Year, a moment of profound liminality when the veil between the world of the living and the other world grew thin. At this fragile, powerful threshold, the Dagda's role was absolute. He was the guardian of this transition, the power that ensured the sun, weakened by the approaching winter, would be reborn. His mating with the Morrigan on the eve of battle, an act of potent sovereignty magic, was believed to be ritually reenacted at Samhain, a divine coupling that guaranteed the land's fertility would return after the barren cold. Can you feel the weight of that ancient night? The entire community's survival through the dark months depended on the Dagda successfully performing his sacred duty, bridging the gap between death and life, ensuring the cycle would not break. His great club, with its power to kill and restore, is a perfect metaphor for this seasonal rhythm. The land must die back in winter, the old growth must be cleared for the vibrant new life of spring to emerge. The Dagda held dominion over this entire necessary process. His immense appetite, his ability to consume the Fomorians' porridge, mirrors the earth's own consumption of the fallen harvest, storing that energy deep within the soil to fuel the growth to come. He was the divine embodiment of the promise that the dark half of the year was not an end but a necessary pause, a gestation period for the world's rebirth. His residence at Bóinne, the great tomb that captures the winter solstice sun, physically anchored him to this solar cycle. Every year, as the shortest day arrived, the people knew the Dagda was within his mound, orchestrating the sun's return, his power pulling the light back into the world. This made him a god of practical, tangible hope. The farmer storing his grain, the herder bringing his cattle in from the winter fields, all placed their trust in the good God's unbreakable command over the turning wheel of time, a faith that the long night would always give way to dawn. This deep connection to cosmic cycles made the Dagda the natural arbiter of justice among his people. Beyond the battlefield and the feast, his hall was a court where the intricate disputes of the gods were brought for resolution. His title, the Lord of Great Knowledge, was not just about prophecy or magic. It was about a profound understanding of truth, balance, and the complex web of obligations that bound the Tuatha Dé Danann together. When a conflict threatened to fracture the tribe, it was the Dagda whose judgment was considered final. His wisdom was the glue that held their society intact. Think of the trust required to settle an argument between powerful, immortal beings, each with their own pride and destiny. The Dagda possessed the authority and the insight to see through pride and to the heart of a matter, delivering verdicts that were respected not merely because of his power, but because of their inherent fairness. One famous tale involves a bitter quarrel over a prized piece of land, a place of incredible beauty and magical significance. Two powerful gods both laid claim to it, each with a compelling story and a righteous fury. The argument escalated, threatening to spill over into violence that would weaken the entire tribe. They brought their case before the Dagda. He did not simply listen to their words. He questioned them, peeling back the layers of their claims with the precision of a skilled craftsman. He sought out the original oaths made, the ancient Jisa that might bind them, and the deeper needs each god was truly trying to fulfill. His judgment was not a simple declaration of who was right and who was wrong. Instead, he crafted a solution that acknowledged the merit in both claims, dividing the land's use according to the seasons, so that each god could enjoy its bounty without infringing upon the other. This was the essence of his judicial genius. He did not break things, he balanced them. His decisions reinforced the idea that the community's strength depended on harmony, not on the absolute victory of one individual over another. He was the wise chieftain, ensuring that the tribe remained whole, his courtroom a place where order was woven from the threads of discord. That same foundational power echoes through the stories of later heroes, even when the All-Father himself steps back from the stage. His legacy is woven into the very fabric of the Ulster cycle, the great epic of the warrior Tuatha. Here, the Dagda is less a direct actor and more a revered ancestor, a name invoked to lend weight and ancient authority to the deeds of a new generation. His influence is most clearly seen in the figure of Tuatha's own father, Lug Lamfodda, the god of many skills. Lug is presented as the Dagda's own grandson, a direct bloodline connecting the fiery hero of Ulster back to the primordial strength of the good god. This lineage is not a mere footnote. It explains the sheer scale of Tuatha's power. His legendary warp spasm, the terrifying battle fury that contorted his body into an unstoppable weapon of destruction, feels like a direct inheritance from the Dagda's own raw, untamed might. It is the All-Father's colossal strength distilled into a human, yet divine, champion. Think of the Dagda's club, capable of ending 9 lives with one end and restoring them with the other. Tuatha's fury shares that same dual nature, a force that protects Ulster by unleashing absolute devastation upon its enemies. The connection goes deeper than simple physical power. The Dagda's role as a master of druidic magic and sacred knowledge finds an echo in the Jisa, the magical taboos that bind and define the heroes of the Ulster cycle. These are not simple rules, but powerful spells of obligation, similar to the binding oaths the Dagda himself could pronounce. Tuatha is bound by a complex web of these Jisa, and his tragic fate is sealed when he is forced to break them. The very system that governs the hero's life and death can be traced back to the druidic authority of the Lord of Great Knowledge. In this way, the Dagda's presence is felt not as a character, but as the foundational law of the mythological world he helped create. He is the deep, resonant hum of power underlying the entire saga, the reason why a hero's strength can shake the earth and why a broken oath can carry the weight of a curse. His story does not end with the Tuatha Dé Danann. It simply changes form, living on in the blood of heroes and the unbreakable rules of their destinies. Even the All-Father's power had its limits against the tide of time. A new people arrived on the shores of Ireland, the sons of Mill, known as the Milesians. These were not gods or monstrous foes, but mortal men, the human ancestors of the Irish people. Their coming marked the final, inevitable shift in the great cycle of sovereignty over the land. The Tuatha Dé Danann had themselves displaced the previous inhabitants, and now they faced their own reckoning. As the Milesians marched inland, the Dagda did not rally his people for a final cataclysmic war. There was no great call to arms, no club raised to defend their earthly rule. Instead, he and the other gods used their greatest remaining strength, their druidic magic, to weave an illusion of such power that it altered the very perception of Ireland itself. They conjured a fierce storm, shrouding the island in mist and tempest, hoping to drive the invaders back to their ships. Yet the Milesians persevered, their mortal resolve proving a force even divine magic could not permanently thwart. A truce was forged, a division of the land itself. The poet Morrigan, speaking for the Milesians, declared that the island would be split in two. His people would take the world above the ground, while the Tuatha Dé Danann would retreat below it, into the hollow hills and sacred mounds they already called home. The Dagda, as the All-Father, would have been the architect of this profound withdrawal. He led his children not into oblivion, but into a parallel existence. They faded from the surface, becoming the Owls-She, the people of the mounds, the beings we now call the fairies of folklore. Their physical dominion was over, but their presence did not vanish, it simply changed form. They became the secret, spiritual guardians of the land, their power flowing through the rivers and buried within the ancient tombs. The Dagda's great cauldron no longer fed armies in the open air, but its magic seeped into the soil, ensuring the land's hidden fertility. His harp's music was no longer heard in great halls, but in the whisper of the wind through the grass and the rustle of oak leaves. In this new, hidden role, the good god's essence remained, a foundational power sleeping just beneath the feet of the new kings of Ireland, waiting for those who knew the old ways to remember his name. So how did ordinary people connect with this earthy, all-powerful father? While the grand myths give us his story, piecing together his actual worship is like uncovering a faded mosaic. We have fragments from old texts and the silent, imposing presence of ancient sites, hinting at a cult that honored the Dagda as a god of the land itself. The most compelling evidence points directly to the Brú na Bóinne, that magnificent solstice-aligned tomb, as his primary sanctuary. This was not just his mythological home, it was almost certainly a central place of pilgrimage and ritual. Can you envision the processions winding their way to that great mound, especially as the winter solstice approached? People would have gathered in the pre-dawn darkness, their breath misting in the cold air, hoping to witness the same miracle we still marvel at today, the sun's beam piercing the inner chamber. This was not merely a spectacle of light, it was a direct communication with the divine. In that moment, the Dagda was demonstrating his power, pulling the sun back from the edge of oblivion and promising the return of life to the frozen earth. To witness this event was to participate in his worship, to feel his goodness in the warmth on your face during the year's coldest morning. Archaeology cannot tell us the exact words of the prayers spoken there, but the structure itself is a testament to his veneration. The sheer effort required to build Newgrange, the precise astronomical knowledge encoded in its stones, signals that the being honored here was of paramount importance. He was a god worth an unimaginable investment of labor and devotion. Beyond this great center, other landscapes were also sacred to him. Specific rivers, forests, and hills mentioned in the tales were likely local cult sites where communities could make their own offerings. What do you give a god who owns a cauldron that never empties? The offerings were probably simple, direct, and deeply symbolic of the things he provided. Libations of ale or milk poured onto the soil, honoring his role as a provider of drink and sustenance. Perhaps the first sheaf of the harvest or a portion of a successful hunt would be dedicated to him, a reciprocal gift thanking him for the abundance he ensured. These were not transactions, but acts of relationship, a way for people to reaffirm their bond with the All-Father who watched over their fields, their herds, and the turning of the seasons. The texts offer tantalizing, if sparse, clues about the rituals themselves. The Feast of Samhain, that liminal night when he coupled with the Morrigan, was undoubtedly a key time for his worship. Great communal feasts would have been held, mirroring his own legendary appetite. The food shared was a sacred echo of the plenty from his cauldron, and the bonfires lit on hilltops were beacons calling upon his power to protect the community through the coming dark and to guarantee the sun's return. In some tales, the Dagda is associated with the mating of kings with goddesses of the land, a ritual that secured the kingdom's prosperity for another year. This suggests that honoring the Dagda was intrinsically linked to the very concept of rightful kingship. A true king was one who, like the Dagda, could ensure the fertility and safety of his people. His worship, therefore, was woven into the political and spiritual fabric of society, a divine model for human rulers to emulate. The evidence may be fragmentary, but it paints a picture of a god who was not distant, but intimately involved in the cyclical struggles of daily life, honored with the very food, drink, and fire that he, in his boundless goodness, made possible. The Dagda's role as a father god and sovereign protector places him in a vast, ancient family tree. When we look across the broader Indo-European world, we find striking echoes of his character in the highest gods of other cultures, suggesting a shared, primal understanding of divine authority. Consider the Norse god Odin. Like the Dagda, who was called the Lord of Great Knowledge, Odin is a god of immense wisdom and magical prowess. But where the Dagda's knowledge feels rooted in the land and its practical cycles, Odin's is acquired through a more personal, desperate seeking. He sacrifices an eye for a drink from the well of wisdom, and he hangs himself on the world tree for 9 nights to grasp the secrets of the runes. Both are wise, but the Dagda's wisdom feels innate, a natural part of his being as the All-Father, while Odin's is fiercely won through ordeal and pain. Their approach to power differs too. The Dagda wields his colossal club, a direct and tangible instrument of force. Odin commands the spear and the subtle machinations of fate, more a strategist and a manipulator than a frontline brawler. Yet both hold sovereignty over their respective tribes of gods, acting as the ultimate patriarch and guide. Then there is the Roman Jupiter, the king of the gods. His connection to the Dagda is even more pronounced in their shared function. Jupiter is a sky father, a god of storms and lightning, while the Dagda is an earth father, a god of the soil and its bounty. This is a fascinating divergence from a common source. Scholars believe both figures, along with the Greek Zeus and the Vedic Dyaus Pitta, descend from a single Proto-Indo-European sky father god, whose name literally meant shining sky. Over millennia, as cultures migrated and settled, this original god evolved. In the Mediterranean, he remained a celestial ruler, his power expressed through thunder from the heavens. But in the Celtic world of Ireland, this divine authority became grounded quite literally. The Dagda's power is not from the sky, but from within the land itself. His club creates the furrows in the earth, his cauldron ensures its fertility. He is the Sky Father transformed into an Earth Father, reflecting a society where the king's legitimacy was measured by the land's prosperity, not just by his command of the heavens. This shared theme of sovereignty is paramount. Just as the Dagda's mating with the Morrigan secured the sovereignty of Ireland, Jupiter's many alliances with goddesses and mortals were acts of political and cosmic consolidation. They were not just kings, they were the source of rightful rule, the divine templates for all earthly power. And what of Dyaus Pitta, the ancient Hindu figure whose name directly translates to Sky Father? He is a more distant echo, a relic from the earliest hymns of the Rigveda who gradually faded in importance, his functions absorbed by other gods like Varuna and Indra. Yet his name alone is a linguistic fossil, a piece of evidence linking the Celtic Dagda, the Roman Jupiter, and the Greek Zeus back to a single ancient root. It is a powerful reminder that these diverse mythologies were once branches on the same tree. So why did the Celtic branch grow so differently? Why did their chief father god become a figure of such earthy, tangible substance rather than remaining a distant, thunderous sky god? The answer likely lies in the Celtic world's intimate, daily relationship with the land. Their survival, their identity, and their kingship were all bound to the soil, the harvest, and the cycles of nature. The Dagda, in all his robust, hungry, and generous glory, is the perfect divine expression of that reality. He is not a god to be feared from a distance, but one to be relied upon, a force as dependable and nourishing as the earth underfoot. That earthy, dependable presence of the All-Father did not vanish with the retreat into the mounds. His legacy has quietly seeped into the bedrock of modern imagination, finding new life in forms the ancient Celts could never have conceived. You can now encounter the Dagda not just in old manuscripts, but as a digital character in popular video games. In titles that draw from global mythologies, he often appears as a powerful, playable figure. His iconic club and cauldron translated into special abilities that can smash enemies or heal allies. These game designers instinctively grasp his core identity, portraying him as a bruiser with a heart, a tank character whose strength is matched by his supportive capabilities. This digital resurrection introduces his myth to millions who might never open a scholarly text, simplifying his complexity but keeping the essence of his goodness, his raw capability vividly alive. Yet this is only the most visible layer of his modern rebirth. In the realm of literature and fantasy novels, authors have woven the Dagda into rich, reimagined tapestries. He strides through the pages of urban fantasy as a hidden king living in a modern city, his earthy power contrasting with the steel and glass around him. In historical fiction, he is the wise, aging chieftain guiding heroes through a world of magic and conflict. These stories often explore the nuances the myths only hint at, giving voice to his humor, his sorrow, and the immense weight of being the All-Father. They ask compelling questions a modern audience understands. What does it mean to be a good father when your children are gods? How do you protect a people who have been forgotten by the world? Through these narratives, the Dagda becomes more than a legend. He becomes a character with relatable struggles, his ancient power resonant with very human concerns. Beyond the world of entertainment, the Dagda's spirit burns brightly in the practices of neo-paganism and contemporary Celtic spirituality. For those who walk these paths, he is not a fictional character but a living, approachable deity. He is honored as a god of the land, invoked in rituals that celebrate the turning of the wheel of the year, especially at Samhain. Practitioners might leave offerings of ale, bread, or seasonal produce at a personal altar or at a sacred site, continuing that ancient, reciprocal relationship of gratitude for his abundance. His role as the All-Father makes him a central figure for those seeking a masculine divine that is nurturing and generative, rather than stern and punishing. He is called upon for protection, for wisdom in making difficult decisions, and for blessing the home and family. This modern worship is a creative and deeply personal revival, piecing together fragments from the old lore to build a spiritual practice that speaks to the needs of today. It acknowledges that his cauldron does not just symbolize physical food, but also spiritual and emotional nourishment. His club is not merely a weapon, but a tool for setting boundaries and defending one's personal sovereignty. The Dagda, in this context, becomes a guide for living a grounded, generous, and fiercely protective life, his ancient titles finding new meaning in a modern seeker's heart. His influence even extends into the quiet, daily symbols we often overlook. The humble club, a tool of raw power, and the overflowing cauldron, a vessel of endless provision, are archetypes that transcend his specific myth. You can see echoes of the Dagda in the gentle strength of a beloved community leader who feeds everyone both with food and with wisdom. You can sense his presence in the archetype of the generous host, the person whose home is always open and whose table never seems to run out of room for one more guest. This is the true testament to his enduring appeal, He is not confined to the pages of history or the screens of games. The Dagda endures because the needs he met are timeless, the desire for security, for abundance, and for a fatherly strength that is both powerful and kind. His story reassures us that true goodness is not about moral perfection, but about profound, reliable capability. It is the comfort of knowing that the foundations of the world, like the cycles of the seasons he commands, are held firm by a force that is as generous as it is strong. This common image of a jolly, oversized god is perhaps the greatest disservice to his true nature. Reducing the Dagda to a simple figure of gluttony and merriment strips away the profound duality that defines his character. His legendary appetite was not a personality quirk, but a direct symbol of his role as a god of the earth's boundless fertility and the necessary consumption that fuels creation. He consumes so that his people may be fed, a cycle as vital as the harvest itself. The humor in these tales was not meant to mock him, but to make his immense cosmic power relatable and human. The laughter he inspires is a bridge connecting ordinary people to a deity whose true responsibilities were as heavy as the club he dragged behind him. Another frequent misunderstanding is confusing him with other Celtic gods, particularly Lugh, the master of all arts. While Lugh is celebrated for his many specialized skills, the Dagda's power is of a different, more foundational kind. He is not a master of individual crafts, but the source of the raw, undifferentiated power from which all those crafts spring. Lugh is the brilliant, multi-talented hero, but the Dagda is the bedrock upon which the hero stands. His goodness was not a single note of kindness, but a complex harmony of strength, wisdom, provision, and necessary force. He was a god who could make you laugh with one breath and command the sun to stand still with the next. This depth is what makes him so compelling, a figure who defies easy categorization and demands to be understood in his full, formidable complexity. The Dagda's legacy is a powerful, fourfold cord binding the Celtic world together. He was the All-Father, a nurturing patriarch whose wisdom guided his children and whose love for the land was absolute. He was the unstoppable warrior whose mighty club commanded the cycles of death and rebirth. He was the Lord of great knowledge, a magician who could halt the sun and command the very earth to rise up in battle. And he was the ultimate provider, whose undry cauldron guaranteed that no one in his tribe would ever know hunger. These roles were not separate, but intertwined into a single, formidable identity. His strength made his provision possible, his wisdom made his strength wise, and his fatherhood made it all meaningful. He remains compelling because he is not a distant, perfect deity, but a god of immense, relatable substance. We see our own struggles and triumphs reflected in his stories, the need for security, the comfort of a full belly, the desire for a protector who is both powerful and kind. His goodness was not a simple moral, but a profound, reliable capability that touched every aspect of existence. So, what part of the good God's story resonated most with you? Was it his clever trickery to secure a truce, the raw power of his magical harp, or the surprising humor of his boundless appetite? Share your favorite tale of the Dagda or any questions you have down in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation about this incredible figure going, exploring the depths of his myth together.